Which grandson is it?
My daughter Mira. It's 11.
How old is he?
11. He's in the hospital again. He's having tests to rule out cancer.
Anybody have Tylenol on them?
Let's
Walk
have the
around with
rules
Tylenol?
out.
Let's hope. This is all just
Yeah, coffee will help, but partially. No, just coffee, yeah.
I don't have to
This stupid thing.
Don't say you're missing something.
Yeah, but it's okay. It's an Hebrew, so it doesn't really matter. Oh no, it's okay. It's okay. Miriam. So I don't know. We'll do with the Hebrew what we can. Don't worry about it. It's just nobody ever translated this, so we have to do a little bit from the Hebrew.
Yeah.
Whoa.
So, Alicia. Really? But only Tylenol, like no ibuprofen, stuff like that.
I was wondering
Is this yours or
if
mine?
both
This is
of
mine.
them.
Do you need it?
Yeah. No, not right now.
Well,
Here's
I'm gonna put it in your one.
two. It goes by weight,
It's 500.
Yeah, that's nice. You sure it's Tylenol though? Doesn't matter. As long as it still works.
What a beautiful ring.
Okay, so
Do you want,
so-
or you take
yeah,
it?
when it cools down, it's fine. So what we want to do today is we're going to discuss something that we've never really discussed, even toward the Nefesh. I don't think we ever discussed this topic. And it's one of the most basic topics in psychology in general, and yet somehow we keep coming up on new things that we've never discussed. I don't know how this is. It has to do with the question of how the soul, how the psyche expresses itself in the body, in life. So we said some things about this once. When Maimonides was the first person to write, at least in Yiddishkeit, a book on psychology, and it's called the 8 Chapters. And these are an introduction to his commentary on Pirkei Avos, on the ethics of the fathers. And these 8 chapters, he discusses how the psyche, how the psychology of the person functions. And you start reading it, and you expect him to say something about how we feel and how we act. He says something, but especially how we feel, how we think. And yet, right away, he starts with a very strange analysis of the psyche, that the psyche has all kinds of forces in it. For instance, there is the force that digests food. And there is the force that puts images together, which he calls, of course, imagination. And there is a force of extension, and there's a force of contraction. And all these strange things, what in the world does this have to do with how somebody in the modern world would think about the psyche? So the reason is that he wants to build from the ground up. That it's hard to understand how the psyche functions at the higher levels if you don't understand how the lower levels function. So the lower levels, so it's a bit of a reductionist approach. And the lower levels are how the nefesh, how the psyche animates the body. That's, first of all, what we would call, in general, the natural soul. It's not even the animal soul. It's a natural soul. It's just what this animates. It's clear that something happens, because when a person is after Mav Yisrim, after he's passed away. So the body is still there, and everything's still there, and something's missing, something really basic. And the really basic thing that you're looking for is the animation. Doesn't matter how smart he is, how advanced psychologically he is, but he's not even animate. That thing is missing. So we understand that lies at the core. I'm not saying anything new, but you'll see in a moment where this is going. So really, to begin to discuss psychology in any way, you have to look at how the psyche animates the body to begin with. You have to look at the animative forces. And then understand that Maimonides and most of Yiddishkeit has the same understanding that the complex functions are just a result not of more complex forces coming down, but rather more complexity in the brain. Meaning, as the child matures, as we grow up, the connections in the brain, or however we see it today, they become more complex. And then a person has a more complex way to function in the world. But at the core, it's no different. It's very interesting. It's no different than the fact that I have in me a digestive power. It's not really different. It's not a matter of a whole new something that came out. That's what it looks like when you read Maimonides, and most people would agree. I mean, if you talk to a reductionist scientist today, so he'll tell you, you know why these drugs work, because at the core, the brain is just a conglomerate of all kinds of chemicals, neurochemicals. They're maybe a little bit more complex than regular molecules, but not really that much. And all we do is we manipulate them. So in the end, everything that you feel, whether you feel joy or you feel, all these things are just, they're no different than how you feel after you've eaten something. And we can affect them the same way. That's the picture that comes out from a reductionist point of view on the psyche and on how the psyche interacts with the body.
They say the kidneys of Avraham Avinu.
Ken, exactly. So what do you mean by the kidneys? It's a function in the kidneys that teaches you how to act. What do you mean? The Torah is, by the way this is explained is because the mitzvot are actually natural. There's this whole viewpoint that the mitzvot are natural things. If you would just be in tune with the world, you would somehow come to the conclusion that you need to put tefillin on. Not to say that you would put straps of leather and tie them around your hand, but there would be some act of showing your connection, some act of, and people do this today. What do? They all do this. There's something that everybody today does, except from Jews, but everybody has them now. It's everywhere. Tattoos. A tattoo is just a permanent form of showing that connection.
To what?
It's to whatever it is. So there's one, it used to be that you were showing connection to, I don't know what. Today it could be to anything. It could be that people are married, they do tattoos, or whatever it is. It's a form of connection. It could be that it's also related to that.
Which is like in people touch when they feel like they need strengthening whatever healing energy to touch those things.
Whenever there's also a new theory about addiction, that all addictions are a lack of contact.
Mm-hmm.
The people, what they're looking for is contact. This is old. This is actually from Jung, from the 50s. He said that really what people are looking for is for connection with other people, and so when they can't get it with people, so they take it wherever they can get it, so it can become a connection to some relationship with something. But
So what's the difference between the natural soul and the animal soul?
so it's just a degree of complexity. The animal soul is more complex than the natural soul, meaning these are higher functions that the body allows the psyche to perform. And it's a matter of degree. It's not like a whole new something that comes out here.
The natural soul is lower?
Natural soul is the most basic. It's what animates the physical body itself. And then you've got the animal soul, which would be like the emotions and so on. So that's a view that you read in Maimonides. And like I said, there's a lot of literature, especially in the Middle Ages, goes in that direction, a very reductionist point of view. There's two things here. True reductionism says there's nothing but material. True reductionism says there's only matter here, and it's just the complexity of matter that creates the illusion of there being a psyche. That's true reductionism. But their reductionism is, no, there's a duality, there's matter and there's spirit, and the spirit connects with the matter, and wherever it connects, it becomes more or less complex depending on where it connected. So why are we saying all this? Because there's a very important thing that Kabbalah adds to all of this. And what Kabbalah added was that it said, actually Maimonides said it in some way, but he didn't explain how it works, is that in the end, all these different functions that you see in yourself, they all stem from one source. So Maimonides says it like in a strange way. He says at the end, but know that all these functions are all one. How can they be different functions? Meaning the fact that I see, and the fact that I smell, and the fact that I think, and the fact that I feel, and the fact that I digest food, and that I push things out and take things in, all these different functions, they're really just one force that comes down, and as it's enclosed in the different body parts, it performs different functions. But really it's just one thing. What would be the analogy today? The analogy today, it's very hard for them, I think, to understand what this was talking about, but an analogy today would be you've got a socket, right? You have electricity in it, and you plug whatever you want in. You can put a computer in it, you can put a blender in it, you can put a vacuum cleaner in it, you do whatever you want. You can charge a car in it. So it's all the same electricity running through all these different appliances, and depending on what the appliance is like.
You say it's like the DNA.
So that's the same type of, right, exactly the same type, except that for some reason in genetics they talk a lot less. Not true, they do talk about it, but it took a while to understand this, that where the DNA is being applied is just as important as what it says in the DNA, meaning which machine you're putting it into, which cell, which RNA is working there. Exactly, same analogy. But this is where Kabbalah adds something very important. And it says, and this is difficult for the non-Kabbalistic mind to accept, that at its core all these different functions already exist in the source. It's not that it's like electricity. When I plug something into the socket, I'm not saying that there's a vacuuming power in the electricity. I'm not saying that there is a light power in the electricity. That is entirely dependent on the vessel that I'm putting into the electricity. But in Kabbalah it's not that way. It's that there's actually all the different powers already exist in the source. Why? Why is it so important to say? And this is a deviation from what I might think. Because we want to say that when God created the world, He didn't create two out of one. He didn't create like just something else. We want to say that what He created was a full-fledged system, all at once. Okay, this requires just one more moment about thinking a little bit about this. The picture of the world that they had in the Middle Ages was one that we call ishtalshalut, or evolution. One thing leads to the next. So you start out with God creating one thing, and that thing develops and pushes something else, and it's like cause and effect keeps going. The picture in Kabbalah was different. That was the big chidush, that Hashem didn't create one thing. There's no such thing. One doesn't create one. In fact, you can almost see that in Rashi. Rashi says, why did Hashem create Adam, male and female together? So that what? So that nobody would say that just as he is one in the heavens, so man is one on the earth. So there wouldn't be some kind of equation between the oneness of man and the oneness of God, so that you would make a mistake and say that man is some type of God. So instead, what did he do? He created two. So the picture in Kabbalah is not that he created two, but rather he created 10. It's always that he created 10 right away, off the top. From 1, it skips all the way to 10. Why? Because it's from unity to plurality. And plurality is not just 2. It could be 2. But in Kabbalah we learned that it's 10. Why 10? So there's a lot of explanations given, but the main explanation is, like when you go to draw something, so the first moment that you touch the ink to the paper, what do you get? You get a dot. What's that dot? What letter looks like a dot?
It's equal to you.
Yud. So Yud is equal to 10. So that's the usual explanation that's given. So it goes straight from 1 to 10. So the soul, before it even comes into the body, it has all the different manifestations that will come out through the body already contained in it. It's not that the mind gives birth to the emotions. And it's not that the mind gives birth to the sight and the sight gives birth to the hearing and hearing. It's not a hierarchy. It may come down as a hierarchy. But in essence, they all exist equally beforehand. Because they exist equally beforehand, so actually, there's a level at which, and this is one of the things that's very difficult to accept, that it's Hashem Rachem, but it's enough to just be alive. That already is a manifestation of Hashem's creation, and you don't have to be able to see or to hear or to think or to feel or to anything like that. Just the fact that this person is breathing, as far as creation is concerned, everything happened already. Because we're equal. We think in terms of hierarchy. We say, well, what good is a life if all you can do is breathe and you can't think and you can't and you can't see and you can't. That's what when we look at it hierarchically, that's how we see it. But in terms of the Torah, there's an understanding that no, that even just the fact that you're breathing, that is life just as much as the person who's thinking the most in the world. The greatest thinker, the greatest prophet, it's exactly the same in that respect.
You take your tablets.
What?
Your tablets are there.
Yeah,
Maybe
it helps vicariously.
could you pass some water? Yeah, probably it's better.
It's not a joke. I'm
No,
serious.
he's waiting for his coffee. Moshe wrote down 2 tablets.
So they weren't round, they were square.
He thought water. You can.
So it's not a joke. The whole thing is, this doesn't really do anything. Yeah, it doesn't. If I'm looking at that level, so whatever's in here, I also have in the source of my soul. It's the same thing. The same plurality exists in my source. Why do I need this then? Just to awaken it. That's what we're going to talk about. So the fact that the Baal Shem Tov, this is a great illustration, so you already went way ahead of what I wanted to say, but when the Baal Shem Tov drank tea, he didn't put the sugar into they had sugar cubes then. It wasn't cubes, mamish, because they didn't have machines to cut it nicely, but it was a chunk of sugar. So he didn't put it anywhere. He just held it in his fingers, and that's it. That's all you need.
It's like your homeopathy.
So, maybe. You don't have to taste it. You have to. So somebody said, why do you need it at all? Because this is natural manifestation of whatever that force is. So I need to draw it down. That's the main point. I need to draw it down, bring it down. Believe it or not, this is all going towards marriage. You see what I'm saying? To say the end in the beginning, the woman is this, and her task. Life in general, but especially when a person is married, his wife is the one who draws down the powers of the soul, the powers of the psyche into the body. So it's like to awaken it. So you don't have to pull it. We'll see in a moment how you do it. But you just have to make a symbol of it. Some kind of symbol, something that has this already in it. You don't have to actually eat it. You don't need these things at all. You just need something that already has it. That's a big principle in spirituality, that you don't actually have to do something physical that is exactly what you want. You need a symbol of it. Something that even in Bezer Anpin, how do you say Bezer Anpin? Like in in a small way resembles the thing that you want. So, for instance, why did we hit the Arava on Hoshana Rabbah? What is that good for? So that's to break. It's a symbol of breaking our own barriers. Aravot are gvurot. They're, for whatever reason, that's what they symbolize. They symbolize the gvurot, the might in the soul. The might in the soul gives barriers. So the main barrier that we want to get rid of the last day of Sukkot is all the, call it the halachic barriers on tzedakah. There's a halachic barrier on tzedakah. Tzedakah says, sages say after the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed that you shouldn't give more than 20%. So, but when I want Hashem to give me beyond what I deserve, beyond my barriers, beyond the sachar v'onish, what on paper I deserve, so I have to break that inside me. So the best way somebody would say is, okay, so go take 100% of your belongings and give them to tzedakah. So you broke the barriers completely, and now everything comes down openly. The conduits are all open. But symbolically, even you do that by breaking barriers with your hand. Those are the aravot that we break, that we hit them on the ground to symbolize the break. But you have to know that that's what it means. So this I know, it takes away a headache. So it's enough that I know it. So hold it in my hand, and that's enough. You don't need to do more than that.
This could work as a diet. It's a new diet. Sugar.
Yeah, all you need is see the food.
It's not a joke. but you have to know, if you only think it's like some kind of sgula,
Right.
I'll just hold it. No, this actually works. It really has, we don't know why exactly, but it works. It takes away pain. So it's enough that it's near you. It has some effect. But only if you understand. If you understand that that's what you're trying to do. You have to draw it down. So the same thing, this is a mashal. This is like a parable for the actual act that will happen when the headache goes away. And it's a parable for it. It's a mashal. That's what we call it. It's not that this also, it just awakens in the body the vessel that brings down whatever that is from the psyche that takes pain away. There's something like that in the psyche that is able to do that. It's not real. Again, it's because I'm dualistic. I don't have a monistic picture. I'm not strict reductionist, strict materialist. I don't think that the body is only, the psyche is made up only of the complexity of the body. I think that there's a body and there's a psyche. And the body's role is to bring down the different forces that already exist in the psyche itself. Same thing. There we eat it. But when you're eating it, so is that the same thing as bringing down sustenance? No, it's not the same thing. It's a symbolic form. It's a parable for that thing that you're bringing down. So this is something that Kabbalah added, which is very important because it's saying that it's not a process. Complexity is not a process. It's not that it first becomes something simple, then becomes more and more and more complex until you get the highest functioning of the psyche. Rather, all the different functions of the psyche already exist in the source. And what happens is that you only pull them down one by one into the body itself, into the consciousness, into whatever it is. But they already exist in their source. In Chassidut, this is called, or it's not from Chassidut, it's actually from Medrash, an early Medrash. These are called Esos Sfirot Agnuzot B'Ma'atzilan. The 10 Sfirot, and here you don't have to think dafka about Sfirot, it's any kind of powers that you want to think about, that are archived in their source, in the place that they already exist there as 10, but they're not 10. There's a whole question, there's a whole literature around this. How can you say it's 10 if you can't see them? But we know from the fact that when they do come down, they come down as 10 separate powers that they already must have existed in some way in the source. And that source is what Hashem created. This source that's very complex, it already has everything in it.
What are you translating as archive?
Gnuzot. Gnuz. Hidden, concealed, archived. You understand the difference? Science thinks that you start with an amino acid and it knocks into another amino acid, becomes a protein. And proteins knock into one another, they become cells. And then cells become multicellular organisms. And it keeps getting more and more complex. That's called evolution. So the multicelled organism site didn't exist in the proteins. There's no site in the proteins. There's no power of sight there. You can't say that. But the Kabbalistic point of view, and the point of view that's adopted by Chassidus, is no, that when Hashem created, He created all the forces together in one source. And this source is always there, and you're only drawing down from it. So I'm not saying how the body, maybe the body was created by evolution, but the fact that it could draw down this power called sight, or that it even went in that direction, that evolution proceeded in the direction of trying to build an eye. Because, again, there's a whole question of evolution. Why would an eye even be created? There's no benefit along the way, only when you have the finished product. So the understanding here is that we're constantly trying to draw down these greater and more call them supernal forces. We want them to be manifest in who we are. So that when we think about like a more rectified person, of being a better person, so we have a picture of what we would act like if we were more rectified. It doesn't come about from more complexity. It's not like being in more and more situations. That's not where it comes from. It comes from the fact that you already have this in you, and you have to find a way to draw it down. That's the picture. Okay. So the next stage in understanding this is that in principle the relationship between husband and wife is like that. That the husband is less attuned to drawing down these forces. He's not so attuned to it. He doesn't realize that he has them even. The male is like stuck where he is. This is what I am. How will I become a better person? Well, it just takes time. Like I'll go through things and I'll try harder, all these things. But the role, as we'll see, of the female, here the body is the female, is to say that it's not about going through different. It's not an evolution. It's just that there is such a thing. You have it, and let's bring it down. So you already have this. You already know what this is. You just haven't had the right conditions or demands, if you want, demanding you to act this way. And this is a very big deal because in terms of behavior, it's a different take on how you progress. Because usually the picture of progressing is evolutionary, meaning you go from light to difficult, right? You go from easier things to more difficult things, and it takes time. And here the understanding is that it's not about, meaning that if you try to evolve towards being a certain way, you would never get there. You could spend all of eternity trying to evolve there. Rather, you have to understand that it doesn't come about because you evolved it, rather because you have to draw it down, you have to bring it down. So let's give always the way to see these things is to take an extreme case. When you take the extreme case, then you can see like how this works. So the extreme case is the less extreme case is a baby when it's born. The more extreme case is somebody who goes through some kind of trauma, brain trauma, at some stage in their lives, and they could go back to being like less than a baby, like a child that doesn't know anything, can't think, can't speak. And then you see the process. And the tendency is to say that the process is that slowly through a lot of works, physiotherapy and other things, suddenly things come back. But it's not, because they come back in bursts. So somebody who was a strict reductionist would say, no, it's because really the body still has all these functions, it just doesn't remember how to do it, so when it remembers, but remembering itself is the same way, it's a burst. It's like suddenly it all comes back. The interesting thing is, and this you can find a lot in Oliver Sacks's books, is that when this actually happens, a lot of times a person's personality is completely altered. Completely, from end to end. So somebody who was very, like there's a famous case that was made into a movie, I don't remember what it's called, Harrison Ford starred in it, I don't remember what it was called. Some guy who was a really, they call it like the cutthroat lawyer in New York, who went through a mugging. It was like he mugged others before in law, but then he went through a mugging and he was shot. And after about 2 years, like he couldn't speak. He didn't recognize anybody. He didn't remember anything. But he couldn't also speak. Even speaking, but it's not a stroke. A stroke will also do something like that. But a stroke is usually, because there's a different type of damage to the brain, because there's no oxygen, it's depending on how it is, it's not always possible to bring the person completely back. But in these things, these types of trauma, because they happen earlier in life, so the brain has incredible repairing qualities, and it's able to bring things back. And then what happened was that he completely changed in his demeanor, in his character, from a person who only remembered, who could only be cutthroat and terrible and walk all over everybody. He became the sweetest man. So his wife was, I don't remember how it is in the original story, but his wife was very surprised, to say the least. Like she was ready to divorce him before then. And now suddenly, so at first you think this is, what a catastrophe, he was shot. But suddenly when he comes back in a completely different way. What is this? It means that every time that you take from this source, you can take whatever you want. It depends on where you want, on who's demanding it from you, who's bringing it, the glove that you're trying to fit. If your psyche is trying to fit the glove of a boxer, so those are the qualities that will come out. If your psyche is, the source is trying to bring down forces to fit something that's like I guess like a silk glove, so that's how it'll come out. It all depends on what the clothing, what you're trying to fit into. And it's an amazing thing because it says that it's not entirely impossible. It's not entirely impossible to change who I am. We usually say that it's very difficult to change the character. Mm-hmm. But here there's a completely different conception that says, no, if you're able to recede back into your source, when you come out again, you can come out different. You don't have to come out the way that you were. And the real change occurs that way. That's how it can actually occur. But it requires the equivalent, the psychological equivalent of being shot in the head, which is not simple. But we have a name for that. That's called bitul. Real bitul means, real self-nullification means that it's as if I can't even speak. There's no room for, I have no way, the psyche contracts back into its source so strongly that there's nothing here to manifest into. That's true bitul. Bitul is never the bitul of the light. It's always the bitul of the nullification of the vessels. It's as if there's no vessels here.
It's like when two people are walking. The first thing they don't talk. Bitul of the speech.
Okay. But there it's for... I don't know if the...
No, it's like when you come out
he's so angry that he can't express himself. But it's not that he doesn't have vessels. In fact, the vessels are the ones they're clogged.
No, they don't talk to each other.
Can't understand, but it's because they're so.
Come out.
It's because the opposite, because they're so into their vessels that they don't even see a way to connect themselves. Here, it's that there's no expression at all. I am nothing. That I am nothing is not that I am nothing. On the contrary, I'm everything, because I go back to my source, which has everything in it. Because when Hashem created, it created all the forces together in the same place. And then they come out because there's vessels that allow them to manifest. And these vessels, in a husband and wife relationship, they're created by the woman. Or, if you want, they're also created by the circumstances, by the surroundings that we have, each one of us. Like, if you're a woman, what's your woman? So your woman is your children, your family, your home. They create what's going to come out. It's as if they pull it out. They bring out of the psyche these forces. Because we've been doing this for a long time, we think that it's natural. We think that this is just how we are. We don't see how a tremendous manifestation this is. Like, that something had to come down. Where is all this written in last week's Parsha? So it's written in the circumcision. It said that before Avram, there's like a contradiction. It's a contradiction. The contradiction says that Avram, without a hay, can't give birth. But he did. He did give birth. Who did he give birth to? Ishmael. Long before he got the hay. So the explanation is that Ishmael is not a real manifestation. He's only a manifestation like Hagar could bring out from Abraham. And all she could bring out from him was just Avram without the hay. Where did Avram get the hay? Who gave it to him? So we say Hashem did, but where did Hashem take it from? No. Adam doesn't have a hay anymore.
It's in Yeshua.
We're supposed to know.
It's a well-known idea.
Yeah, it's a well-known idea.
It's not.
Or is it
Right. How?
The Yud from
The Yud was split into two. He got one half of the hay. He got one half of the Yud. He got her first hay. So what did she? She actually gave him the king's new clothing. But in order to do that, he had to be first circumcised. What does that mean? That he had a garment already, but the garment that he had was one that did not allow his higher self to come through. Meaning his power of procreation was limited by his not being circumcised. What does it mean not to be circumcised? That there's a skin, there's foreskin. Foreskin symbolizes that there's something cutting off my higher powers from coming down. That it's opaque. The foreskin is opaque in the sense of light. It doesn't let the higher supernal light come through it. So the first thing that he needed to do was remove the foreskin. That was his garment until then, the garment of procreation. His power of procreation was enclosed in a garment that was opaque. So all it could give birth to was Ishmael. He gave birth to Ishmael. Ishmael is not a manifestation of Avram's higher self. It's a manifestation of very high levels, but it's not the same. It's not the full thing. It's not the full gamut of who he is. After he circumcises, he has to get a new hay from Sarah. She has to give him a new clothing, a new garment to wear. What could this garment be? What could this garment be? What garment did she give him? So to give him, symbolically it's the hay, but what did she give him that she didn't give him until then.
The godly soul?
No, it's a garment. It's not a power. It's like a, here, wear this. Let's see how this looks on you. So she pictures him in a new way. That she hadn't pictured him that way until then. We said last week that Rav Shandel says that behind every successful man, there's a woman standing, surprised. Right? Because I know what he's like. What? So more than that, she did something even more than that. She more than just believed. She believed him all the time. She gave him a garment that he hadn't had until then. We don't see that he's able to do this.
Before he did for others.
No.
And now, after his own child.
So that's also very interesting. That even before then, you see that like he's willing to use her to a certain extent, but now it's just for her. So it's interesting. It needs to be discussed. But she did something that it's the first time that anybody does this in the Torah. Why was he called Yitzchak, their son?
Oh, she laughed.
She laughed.
That's right.
She laughed. So he laughed also. It says that he also laughed. What's the difference? That she laughed, it says, because she really didn't believe that he could. He's too old. So she laughed at it. What does this mean? What did he do with this? He used it as a metaphor. That's the whole trick. What the men have to learn to do is when you're given a garment, don't treat it too literally. Think about it as a parable for something else. What could this be a parable for? Well, that's up to you. You have to figure out what it is. But behind everything that your wife does, you have to treat it like it's a parable. What does it mean a parable? It's a mashal. It's a parable that Hashem is speaking to you through what she's saying and doing. So that's what he figured out. He understood that this child, his source is in the power of laughter. It's a tremendous, tremendous pleasure that is going to come down to manifest as this child. Something that they didn't have until now. Until now, why did Avram do everything? For what purpose? To monotheism, make sure the world is it, just to have pleasure in Hashem, that was beyond him. He was a very directed, it says he was tamim b'ma'asav, telech lefanai v'yetamim. His heart was whole in the sense that everything he did for the purpose of something. But litzchok, to laugh, what is laughter good for? What does it do? It doesn't do anything in the world. It doesn't get you towards a goal. It's just healthy. It's for itself. That ability to see that I connect to Hashem not only because, or I lead my life not only because there's a purpose to it, but because it's pleasurable to be this way. It's fun to be this way. This is the best way to be. There's no purpose. Don't look for where it's going, how it's going to get there, what time it'll arrive, and how many people will be on the train. Who cares? That ability to... She laughed again for a different reason. She laughed because she said, he's too old. He understood, what does this mean? What does it mean, too old? You can't teach somebody old new ways. Except, if they suddenly understand, you can also laugh at the world. Laugh at yourself also.
It's simcha?
It's tanug. It's an expression of his tanug. Avraham was, before that, all will, all ratzon. And the tanug was missing. She was able to draw that down. By, again, I don't know how much she thought about it, but you could say at some level she probably also thought about it. And she said, this is what he needs. He's too old. If he doesn't laugh here, nothing will work. It's the pleasure of pleasure itself, without the purpose of something. without some direct reason for which. Now this is like wow. When you think about a person like Avram, if you can even begin to wrap your head around somebody like that, whose every action is to, he's mamish like a shaliach who doesn't rest for a second. Everything that he does is, who can I speak to now, and what can I do now? So it's just to sit and laugh. It's like
It's like against his nature.
completely. But says the Alter Rebbe, that is his higher nature. That's the hay. The hay is hay chasadim. It's loving kindness. That's what needed to come down into his life. And when that came down, that was the new clothing. That was the king's new clothing for his soul. So then Yitzchak could come out. And Yitzchak is kol hashomai Yitzchakli. Anybody who hears this will laugh.
He had loving kindness to begin with.
He's all loving kindness. But there's a higher form of loving kindness that doesn't have a purpose. It's just loving kindness. I don't do it because it's pleasurable. Because it's good. It feels good. That's what it is. So the circumcision was taking off the old vessels. It's like a type of nullification. It's taking away the foreskin, the way you express yourself until now. And that opens up the person, and take away his clothing, take away his manifestation, take away his personality, take away all the things that the soul comes into. It gives him a chance to get new clothing. And the new clothing was given by Sarah. But it's even more than that. We said until now a parable. Like that laughter was a parable. The fact that she laughed, was a parable. He understood it as a mashal. For this thing that you also have to do things without dafka some kind of reason, some kind of purpose. You just enjoy them. Just pleasure. Yeah.
So why is there this negative thrust on her laughing that Hashem comes
Again, because he had to. Because the initial reaction is that you have to think about these things and take them out of their literal meaning. That literally she was doing something not so right. Right? That her reaction didn't come from a place of, this is just fun. Didn't come from there. It came from a disbelief. How can I believe? It's so disbelievable that it causes me to laugh. But if you understand what's hiding behind that, what does it mean? There's something is, meaning that there's a source so high that if I would tell you that this exists, you would laugh at it. It can't be. That doesn't exist. Said it, but that's exactly the highest source. That's exactly what Hashem is. That's exactly what it means to take from a source that's so high that in the present context it doesn't even seem serious. It's laughable. Who would believe you that Hashem is that big? But he is.
Why does Hashem make such a big deal about it? Why could you just pass? That she laughed, it doesn't have to be made into a big deal. Hashem comes down.
So what I want to say is that that's exactly why couples argue. That argument, where you argue, is like Hashem telling you, look here. Look here, this place, you have to finish the argument in some way, right? You have to make up in some way. You have the husband's role especially is to look at what we're arguing about it and understand that Hashem is telling him, look at this and uncover the hidden treasure inside. There's some kind of, it's a parable for something. And the woman has to understand that the only reason I'm really arguing about this is not because it's so dear to me, but because Hashem said so. She also has to understand that this was an issue for me, not because it's really such an issue. But right now, Hashem wants it to be an issue. Because this is the only way that we're going to get to a deeper manifestation of our own psyches coming into ourselves. Yeah.
Doesn't that kind of like negate the fact that, we may be focusing on the wrong things, or we're having repetitive issues, like just thinking that, okay, it's coming from Hashem, and it's only because he wants us to have this argument that we're having with his away your responsibility to work on yourself?
On the contrary, how are you going to work on yourself? I think that that's the best way to work on yourself. That it could have been different. Why am I stuck on this point? It's not so important.
Because Hashem wants us to be.
He's making me stuck on this point. Only as a signpost. Only as saying, dig here. He's marking the spot, that's all. I don't have to be so connected to my hang-ups. Meaning I can see that they're just circumstances. They change. Like today was this way, and tomorrow it's that way.
Don't you find, I don't know, I feel like it's the same hang-ups. Just keep.
Because you haven't dug in the spot yet. Hashem is telling you, and is telling the couple, come and dig. If you don't take the treasure out at this point, you won't get new hang-ups. You need new hang-ups. Otherwise you get tired of the old ones. But if you dig into them and you look for what they symbolize and what you can gain from them, then they'll go away. They will resolve. Because that's the only reason that anybody has any difficulty in life. It's because that's where they need to dig. That's where they need to uncover something that's hidden. So for Avram and Sarah was this strange point that they're stuck with this laughter now. And Hashem makes it into a really big deal. And he sends an angel to tell them, why did she laugh? And Avram has to think about it. And he spends time thinking about it. Then he realizes, I can also laugh. But the laughter from him is already a more cathartic laughter. And then eventually it becomes for her also. That when she gives birth to him, she says, you know what? The essence of this child was us uncovering the value of laughter. And again, laughter here is just a metaphor for what it means to do things because they are pleasurable, not because I'm on a mission. Meaning that the mission itself is pleasurable. It's not because of the mission, it's because this is good. This goes back a little bit to what I mentioned before about the kidneys, that there's something natural about this Yiddishkeit that he's looking for, this serving Hashem that he's looking for. It's not necessarily because I'm always, when you think about it, where is it all supposed to go? Are you supposed to stay in a place where forever you're just Kabbalat Or? Or is the whole purpose of Kabbalat Or, of taking the yoke of heaven on you, because it's supposed to elevate you to a higher place? But when you reach that higher place, it's no longer a yoke. It's actually the most natural, the funnest thing that there is. There's no better way to live. And it has to reach, when it reaches that way, that's called in the Zohar, it's called the Parnasun Minei. That our Parnasa, meaning our whole livelihood in the world, physical and spiritual, of course the Zohar means particularly spiritual, but in Chassidus it's explained it's also physical, is derived from Torah. That's
Parnasa comes from the one.
And from the wife also. Torah. But it means that this is the way to live. The world is quickly going in that direction, that the physical needs will be met for everybody at the basic level. And the question will be, so what do you do with your time? You do with your time, you live through the Torah. You come to this place.
This whole revelation is like, it's more conscious, more super conscious. Like,
So luckily, like I said, Hashem throws it at you at ground level. Like you get stuck in these arguments or these things that don't work so well and whatever, just because it's like how we live. I don't know how to explain it exactly. You can analyze it all you want, because our parents were like this and my parents were like that, and a million things. Who cares? But there's just a signpost in the end.
right.
But Hashem gives it to you at that level so that you won't miss it.
That's how you-
If you had to
it's
think
on the
about it,
ground.
right? If you had to think about it and come to it through your powers of extrapolation, I doubt we would ever get to it.
So you switch your perspective,
Right.
but then the process that happens is more in the conscious mind.
Again, it has to be in the conscious mind.
Right.
To unravel the parable here, you have to analyze, you have to think about it. And you can't always think about it yourself. Sometimes you have to go to somebody else and they'll help you, like, try to interpret what is going on here, what is hiding behind all this.
But the biggest thing is to realize it's a treasure.
Right,
It's
right.
something-
That there's really a treasure hidden there. It's just a signpost. It's just next to the Marxist spot. But there's a higher level of this also, and that's, we're not going to have so much time to discuss it, but apart from Hashem coming down in parables, he also comes down in what we call riddles. Okay? Parables are relatively straightforward. Parable is like that. I have to use my powers of analysis and try to figure out, like strip it of the mundane meaning in it and try to get to the core. But riddles are more difficult. Why is that? Because in the parable, there's already the essence of what I'm looking for is there already. It's just covered up by all kinds of, we just call it enclothement. It's malbushim. It's like when you say parable, you say, right, easiest, simplest parable in the world is say he runs as fast as a cheetah, right? So if you think about a cheetah, you already understand what speed is. Just that image already contains what you mean. So even the most complex parables, doesn't matter how complex they are, the nimshal, the thing that you want to be talking about, is already in there. It comes with the package. But in a riddle, the answer is not in the package at all. In fact, it's somewhere else. The riddle is like a map to get to somewhere else where's the whole question of whether you can even find it or not. Really good riddles, like what we call, in Hebrew it's called kitvei chida. I don't know how you say it in English. It's like these really complex twists and turns of language that somehow you have to figure out. There used to be a guy who passed away in Israel. His name was Chamitzo. And he was a genius in this. He used to write these 1-2 line riddles, and they would publicize it on the radio or in the newspaper. This is all of the 70s, 80s, 90s, even up to 10 years ago before he passed away. And each time they put a huge, money prize on it for whoever could solve these. Chamitzo, I don't remember his first name. So I remember one in particular, that he took the first word of the Tanakh and the last word, Bereshit Vayal. And he wrote something. Of course, it didn't contain either Bereshit or Vayal. It's all these very complex, it was like 4 lines. And every day on the radio, they gave people a chance to try to solve this. It took over 1.5 years. But when you solved it, when it was finally solved, the prize was like 1 million shekels or something already. And when it was solved, it was amazing because it was there, but it wasn't there at all. You couldn't. The really good ones, the really good chidot, these riddles, they really don't contain the place that you're going to.
But you're meant to look anyway.
But you're meant to look. And the fun is in pursuing it, even if you don't find it. It's like you don't even have to get to the. It's the challenge in the thing itself. It's like understanding that it's not at all about. Even if you figure out where this is going, it's going to be somewhere very surprising. Again, that's what I meant by that there's a woman standing behind him, surprised. Why? Because I didn't know that that's where it's going to go. I knew that I had to get him to be home at a certain time, to see the kids, to do this, but he couldn't do any of these things. So how did it turn out that he's revered as a holy person or something? How did that happen? But it's a riddle. It's even better than a metaphor. So it's like understanding is sometimes what is going on between the couple is a riddle. It's not even a metaphor. You can't solve it by just uncovering there's like the really deepest thing that's going on won't be figured out until the end. Like when you get there, you'll understand that this was going there. But it's a whole different look at all the conflicts that occurred at the beginning of this week's parsha, also between Avram and Sarah. that they are meant to give birth to Yitzchak. All these conflicts, all these terrible twists and turns that happen with Hagar and with Ishmael, and they're not having children for a long time, and going down to Egypt and the way that he treated her, all these things. In the end, it does point in a certain direction, to Yitzchak. It does go there. It is the offspring that you bring into the world. It is your power of procreation. But yet, it comes through these conflicts. It comes through these places but you have to learn how to dig. So the role of the woman is, first of all, not to get hung up too much. It's not really as serious as I take it, because it's more that Hashem is telling me, get stuck here. So I don't have to get stuck that hard. I mean, I have to serve my purpose. I have to get stuck a little, otherwise nothing will happen. There'll be no friction. Nothing. We won't know that this is where it is. But the role of the man is to first of all to understand that, but also to work it out together. How do you solve these parables? You have to speak it out. You have to work it out. You have to speak it. It won't. You can't just analyze it, and just by analyzing it in your head you'll figure it out. It's by speaking it out, and that's what the Alter Rebbe explains here. This is all here actually, but it's a good thing we didn't read it in Hebrew. No, this is the Alter Rebbe. So what he says here is, when you do that, that's called sweetening the harsh judgments at their core. Finding out what the parable is, what it was about. It's almost like, what are you really angry at? Or what are you really upset about? But when you figure it out for real, it dissolves all the tension. That's what it means to sweeten the harsh judgments. The woman is more susceptible to them. She's more sensitive to these harsh judgments that come down. But the harsh judgments are like where to dig. So she catches them first. And then to sweeten it is to think about, how do we take this apart? The Alter Rebbe used to say this on the verse Vuim Sholbach, which is usually translated as he'll control you, he'll dominate you. But he explained, Vuim Sholbach is that the man's task is to see everything that his wife tells him as a parable. So it doesn't have to be a conflict. It could just be that every time she tells me something, it's Hashem telling me something from above that I have to figure out for myself. And if we speak it out, we'll understand what's going on. Again, not to get too hung up. Even 1 year, my wife has to go live in a different place. So we move, and then suddenly it's good for half a year, but then it's not good anymore. We move again. So which is it? Are you happy here? Are you not happy? It's inconsequential. That feeling of whether I'm happy or not happy, whether I want to be, it looks like it's just the moods, but it's not exactly moods. It's these harsh judgments coming down and being collected in the vessel, and the woman feeling them. And so today she feels like she wants to move. Tomorrow she feels like she doesn't want to move. Settle, don't take it so hard. It doesn't matter. Because life is not about whether it all just works out. It can't be that way. There have to be these points of contention where you figure out something deeper. And the only way you would know about it is because suddenly it looks like a mood swing. It looks like something else. It looks like depression. Who cares what it looks like? Who cares what it's called? In the end, it's also don't get too hung up on it. It can change tomorrow. It's just that Hashem wants you to dig here right now. This is where He wants you to work. Sometimes He wants you to work there for a long time. Sometimes you don't figure it out for a long time. Sometimes you do figure it out very quickly. It depends. Okay.
So are we going to do this Torah orphan stuff?
We did. We did it exactly like we did with the Tylenol. You put it here, and it works. So you put the Torah or in front of you, and it all comes down.
Which one were you doing?
ולא יקרא שמך אברהם, והיה שמך אברהם כי אבא מונדל. It works exactly the same way. You just put it in front of you, and you discuss it, and then it comes out. Everything comes out.